So welcome everyone. I'm thrilled to be with you this evening for the Philadelphia chapter of Diversity in Blockchain's virtual event tonight on the topic of blockchain use cases in cybersecurity. The moderator for this evening is going to be Rhonda Okamoto of Macgyver Tech, and our speakers this evening are going to be Dr. Hasshi Sudler of Internet Think Tank and Steve McKeon, also known as Mac, who is the founder and principal of Macgyver Tech. The presenters tonight are going to be discussing a number of topics: dark web and ransomware issues, improving data integrity and digital identities, as well as keeping governments accountable through public records management. For those of you unfamiliar with diversity in blockchain, also known as DIB or DIB, it is a national 501c3 organization that was founded back in 2018 by 5 amazing powerhouse women in the blockchain space. Chapters are being opened around the country in major cities, and I am Jennifer Zegel. I am the founder of the Philadelphia DIB chapter and also the current chair. I'm a partner at the law firm of Rieger. That was my old firm, definitely not there. I'm a partner at Kleinbard, and I'm happy to be with you tonight, and I'm so thrilled that our speakers could join us. Now, the Philly DIB board has been very active despite some of the setbacks of the pandemic, and I'm really excited to share with you some initiatives in 2021 that we're going to be unrolling that really deal with promoting educational awareness and community service initiatives in the blockchain space. We are also working on some great programming for 2021. So if you have any topics that you would like us to consider, or if you want to get more involved in DIB, or if you just want to stay connected and know what's going on in future events, please feel free to reach out to myself or Rhonda and Steve, who are also Philly DIB board members, or you can email phillydib@gmail.com to be put on our mailing list. Please feel free to mute your microphones and also hide your videos during the presentation tonight. And feel free to also put any questions you have in the chat box, and we will get to them at the end of the program. So many, many thanks again to Dr. Sudler and Steve and Rhonda for being here with us tonight. Without further ado, I'm going to turn over the microphone to Rhonda Okamoto. Now, Rhonda is the Global Business Development Manager at Macgyver Tech, which is a tech and business solutions company. She's also a benefits specialist and business consultant for Legal Shield. She's very involved in diversity in blockchain, and she's also the chairwoman of the Women in Business Roundtable for the Lower Bucks County Chamber of Commerce, among other blockchain organizations she's associated with. And her passion is really to help individuals become better digital citizens by understanding their digital footprints and taking control of their digital identities. So thank you, Rhonda.
Thank you, Jennifer. It's great to see everyone, and welcome to our October blockchain discussion on cybersecurity. Cybersecurity awareness is in its 17th year. October is the month, and I'm happy to help to do my part in continuing to raise awareness about the importance of cybersecurity across America. The theme this month is Do Your Part, Be Cyber Smart. So right now, criminals have becoming increasingly, cybercrime has become increasingly complex, and people are trying to steal our valuable information. Personal identifying information such as our financial data, our health records, and intellectual property. I've been speaking on risk management and really being a digital citizen the last 7 years, and I've been following up with the Equifax breach because we know 147.9 million Americans, which is almost half of the United States, along with 15.2 million British citizens and about 19,000 Canadian citizens. So it's one of the largest targets related to identity theft. And Steve's going to be talking about some of when hackers exploit a vulnerability in a software program. That's what happened with the Equifax breach. But most importantly, what is the US government doing to help us with, because we can't opt out of credit bureau monitoring, but what is the US government trying to help us with? And is there any government agency that can actually help us with this situation? The Equifax breach, they determined in February of this year that it was the members of the China's People Liberation Army that hacked the Equifax, and nothing has shown up in the dark web yet. It's been in the first 17 months, but not all the time will the criminals actually act on the information. They're going to sit on it. So that's what's going on with identity theft, and why you may not know anything in the first year. It may take several years for it to happen. And they believe that the Chinese are going to use it for espionage, which means, to hack certain people. So that's kind of what's going on there. And now, because everybody is relying on working from home, talk a little bit about safety in our networks. We're going to talk about a little bit on online shopping and schools out, how to help your kids be safe, and all the smart devices, and the fact now that we're all streaming services, going to the movies, and how your identity and your information can be hacked into with doing that as well. So I'm going to ask Steve the first question. What cybersecurity crimes have you seen since the COVID's happened?
Oh, wow. I could probably start off with a pretty simple top 10 list that'll just probably narrow it down. And it's kind of scary, to be honest, to see how things have really increased exponentially since COVID has happened. So I'll just run down a top 10 list of some things I found here. So the first one here, the number of unsecured remote desktop machines has grown by 40%. That means people are just putting them online and not securing them. Very easy targets for hackers. 40% of those machines are just being easy targets for them. Number two, remote desktop brute force attacks grew by 400%. So basically brute force attacks that basically by using passwords that you might have used on a compromised site in the past are now being used on other sites that has increased 4 times over. Email scams related to COVID surged 666% since actually this in March alone. Users are now 3 times more likely to click on pandemic-related phishing scams. Billions of COVID-19 pages are on the internet now. 90% of newly created coronavirus domains are created every day. They're created or scammy. 2,000% increase in malicious files with the word Zoom in the name. Number 10, COVID-19 related ransomware cases rose 105%. A total of 809 ransomware attacks have taken place in the last 12 months. That's according to Dark Tracker. So pretty scary statistics. It doesn't seem like it's getting any better. So yeah, it seems to be getting worse. So there's a lot of things, a lot of people aren't doing the secure things, and there's a lot of things we can do that are pretty simple to do that are out there. And some of it is really just being a little more vigilant, being on top of things, and not like just kind of taking something or clicking on a link that because it says COVID-19 or some good common sense things to do. So I hope that's a useful list to start kind of talking about this. Some recommendations and preventive tips could be just kind of, making sure that you're locking down all your passwords in a very efficient way. Don't repeat your passwords or use common names or phrases inside of them that are being used otherwise, or even your dog's name. You can't even use those types of things. It honestly should be a randomized generated password, at least 16 digits long now, and that keeps getting larger. So it's really hard for anybody to even remember any passwords anymore, to be honest. So that's becoming a problem. So there's actually tools out there that actually make this easier. Things like LastPass. There's also websites called passwordgenerator.net that are really useful. If you don't want to kind of come up with these easy ways of remembering passwords, they'll do it for you. You can save them in a nice, proper way. And I'll probably give a little demo of some of these things a little bit later to show some of these sites or some of these things that I use. I've been in software and computers for my whole life. I've been an ethical hacker, and I like to take things apart. So I kind of understand how some of the bad guys operate and what they're looking for. And I try to actively prevent those. And I put that in layers, not just doing one thing. It takes multiple things to protect yourself online these days. So I hope that's useful information for anybody in here. Now, I'm not sure if I can share the screen here. I'm like to share a few things if that's okay, and show you a few demos of a few of these just kind of tools that I use that might help everybody here be a little safer online. One of them here is, I'll get this out of the way. So we have a strong password site generator here. It's called passwordgenerator.net. It's a free service. You can come here and it already defaults to all the standards that you would need to do. You can change it, but I wouldn't go lower than what it has here. And it'll just generate the passwords at will for you. If you like the password, you can keep it and save it and do what you want.
Steve, we can't see your screen that you're.
Oh, you cannot see the screen. Oh, which screen is it sharing?
I can see the mountains.
Oh, hold on one second. Let me see if I can share the screen here. Can you see that screen?
Yes.
You do. Do you see the password generator now?
Yes.
Okay, I apologize to everybody. So the website is here. It's passwordgenerator.net. Now that you can see it, and this is a really easy thing. Rhonda, would you mind maybe pasting some of these resources in the chat window at some point? This is a really easy thing. This goes through all the simple things you would need to do. If you're unsure what these all do, they actually give you an explanation of the things you should and should not do on passwords. And this is the standard now. I wouldn't do anything less than this, or you're going to be in trouble probably. So hopefully that's some useful information there. It's really easy to generate these. You can copy and paste this as you please. Really simple tool. So you can do that at, when you like to. Another one I would like to show you guys is a little special tool I found. It's not like your normal thing you would find for this type of stuff. And it's actually made by a German company called O&O. And ironically, they remove all the spyware that Microsoft installs into your computer for free, and tracks all the stuff that you're doing. And the hackers love to take advantage of these systems too, because they're already in place. So we have a tool now that actually disable many of these mechanisms that are causing a lot of this stuff to happen behind the scenes without your knowledge. And it's a really simple tool. It's free. You can go to it. We'll provide the links as well. And this goes through and shows you all the different things it does. It gets a little scary because, I mean, everything you can imagine your computer's doing and more is here. And this is an easy way to shut them off. It has an ability to do recommended settings and some other settings too. I would just kind of read through it and, understand what you're kind of doing here, but it does have a couple quick, easy ways of making sure you're safe and having a lot of the things that are open, closed by default once you run through. It's really simple and easy. It goes through and shows you what the switches are and what they do, and it kind of tells you a little recommendation if this is something that's safe or not. Pretty simple and easy tool. I use this. It's a really awesome tool. Like I said, it's free, made by a German software company called O&O, and I install it on every Windows 10 machine that I can. So hopefully that's useful information from the standpoint of giving some useful tools that at least protects you online here, because it's becoming a crazy Wild West and it's gotten worse.
So Steve, when I was researching on some of the crimes that have happened, actually, because 40 million people have filed for unemployment benefits, this is a point that a good point that the criminals can actually grab our information, because 6 states actually were really
I would never use these people again. They just don't
building up the do-it-yourself website for
I'm doing it intentionally. I'm being an intentional dick. You can wait.
Uh-oh.
There's somebody talking in here.
Let me see.
Go ahead, Rhonda.
Oh, so anyway, what I found in my research is that 6 states now have put up a website just for the people who actually information was compromised by filing for unemployment. So
Wow.
The credit bureaus have done, this is for everybody, you can get a free credit report every week until April of 2021. So that's a tip that I'll give out. And I think everybody knows how to get annual credit report. You just go there. And the suggestion is to do a different credit bureau, not just the same one every time, because then you'll get different reports for credit bureaus.
Sure.
So that's kind of a tip that I found out. And can you explain the difference between a data breach and data exposure? A lot of people don't understand the difference.
Well, a breach is basically means somebody's breached the system. They got into the system, they can copy anything they want. So that's basically, your game's over, they have everything or a good portion of the data. The other one is, some information is leaked that might not have the full amount of information. So it can be, in any case, it's really not good. That information is being out there and leaked, and could be detrimental to anybody's personal finances or to the well-being of it, at least more information like medical records and stuff like that.
Okay. And I'm sorry, Professor, I forgot to introduce you. Hasshi
Okay.
is a professor at Villanova, and he teaches courses in ethical hacking, malware defense, analysis, cybersecurity behavior and analytics, and blockchain technologies and applications. So I'm so happy that the professor is able to help us tonight learn a little bit more. Do you have a topic or a few words on the data breach, like what you really teach in school about that?
Sure. Thanks a lot, Rhonda. And as Rhonda mentioned, I'm an adjunct professor at Villanova University. We do focus a lot on cybersecurity as one of the areas I teach in, as well as blockchain, which ties into security as well. It secures transactions. We'll talk a little bit about blockchain as well. But to the extent of cybersecurity, one of the things that Rhonda mentioned in the opening of this program, that you see some of these large hacks, like the Equifax hack, that affects half of the United States, and that some of these hacks are done very patiently. When people tend to think about hacking or their image of what a hacker does, the image is that this person is in a rush, that they are doing something fairly quickly, over maybe a 24-hour period, and they're hacking into some system, and it's very quick. It's actually just the opposite. Hackers are very patient individuals. They work in various stages of hacking. First, with some form of reconnaissance. They're looking for information, and they can do this for years. They can gain access into a system. They can monitor that system. They can watch how systems are being updated, perhaps passwords, how they're changed, when systems are brought up and down, perhaps for maintenance. So they're looking for processes. And one of the most important lessons that I provide my students when we go through understanding cybersecurity is that cybersecurity is much more than just systems. It's more than just servers and databases. It's really about three things. It is about systems, but it's also about people, and it's about processes. So those three things, all of our cybersecurity students and experts should really pay attention to when they're trying to secure environments. Make sure you're securing your systems, but also make sure that the people who are working in an organization are very aware of cyber threats, that they are protecting their own information, that they're not simply clicking on anything that pops up on their email, because that's an entry point for a cyber attacker. And then the processes themselves. So, as I was mentioning, hackers can actually wait a long time because what they're looking for are processes. And it's the processes that if they understand when systems go offline, then they know exactly when to attack. That may be the vulnerability point. So when the system is brought back online, something new may be picked up in the reboot process. That may be the malware getting into the system. And of course, they're looking for whether or not people who are maybe in IT responsible for some of these systems are even looking at the security of some of the information in their databases. Perhaps some of the emails are not encrypted. That's a huge taboo, but it does happen. And so, hackers can be extremely patient. They can wait for quite a long while, and then they'll choose the right opportune moment to attack. So I think in that regard, society at large, we need to constantly rethink how we understand cyber attacks happen. And then in the age of COVID, as we are now, as Steve was mentioning, all of these cyber attacks seem to be on a huge increase. And if we think about it, that's not too surprising, because whenever cyber attackers attack in the sense of attacking process, they're looking for moments where people are confused, where people are under stress, where people are very busy with the unusual, and certainly coronavirus is extremely unusual. So we do see increases in the number of attacks during holiday season. So we're about to come across a holiday season right now as we get into Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's. Within the space of payments, we see this every year in terms of cyber fraud. We do expect to see more cyber attacks happening in this period because people are also stressed because of coronavirus itself. But to one of the particular points that Steve raised, all of these COVID-related or COVID-19 related websites or applications, they're just popping up. A number of them are malicious, and a number of them can be designed to lure people in, looking for metrics about COVID-19, maybe looking for some application that can help them with some data. And some of them are very specifically designed to be malicious. That's quite unfortunate because there are a number of really good applications that are being made available to help people with, say, contact tracing or information gathering. And those good applications are being mixed with a lot of these malicious applications. And so Google, for example, is extremely strict in terms of which COVID-19 applications can be uploaded to their Google Play Store. At Villanova, we're actually developing a COVID-19 contact tracing application based on the blockchain. But we're having a lot of trouble getting it up on the Google Play Store because they have extremely strict rules because of how many people abuse the term COVID-19 contact tracing in their malicious sites. So it's unfortunate that these are happening because it's a time where people do need solutions. And we need to just be aware of how to be careful to avoid those malicious types of sites and applications and find the good ones.
But once they get your email, they can get into most of your accounts, correct? Because your email is really kind of like the door.
Yeah, well, email is, in order to get the email, you need some way to access, right? So if we're saying getting email, meaning they have access to your email accounts, yes, that's extremely dangerous because now they have the vector of how you're getting information, and that typically is also a place where you renew your password. So all of these things tend to go through your email through email verification. So if they can actually get that point where they can verify on your behalf, then they can go in and change your passwords to various sites because sites are having to rely on email to confirm your identity.
And is that, Steve, a part of the SIM swapping that they do when they get your phone and then they have access? So now that they can.
Well, yes, but they're also contacting the telecom companies directly, and they're asking them to switch it over and to, kind of get you a new kind of SIM right there. So it's part of that process. Yes, once if they have your email and they have access to your email, it's kind of game over. I mean, they can do a lot of damage.
Yeah. And I think just to go back to that point, Steve, that you were talking about in terms of passwords, and thanks for showing the password generation tool. Passwords have been such a pervasive problem in society, and as we have more and more websites where we need to create access to accounts, I would say about 10 years ago, one individual had on average about 30 different accounts they needed to keep track of. Now we have, probably about on average, 50 to 60 different accounts, whether they're bank accounts or, accounts to a school or, all sorts of logins that need to be individually maintained. And so we have all of these passwords that we need to manage. The challenge, of course, that happens is that people do not remember all of these passwords. So what they tend to do is they make them all the same. Okay, that's also a big taboo. Don't make your passwords the same, but who can remember all of these passwords? Another way, of course, is getting some type of application that you can lock them in. And that is one solution, but it does ultimately come down to writing down your password. Some people want to avoid writing down the password in any event. One of the things I do recommend, and perhaps it's something for folks to think about, is moving to these passphrases. And Steve mentioned that, moving to passphrases, which are just harder for any type of password cracker to crack. Password crackers effectively work off of word lists. So what we call these, massive word lists, where it will look at dictionary words and other word combinations and try to guess what your password is by mashing the password hash. But one other thing you could do to make your passwords even stronger, if you speak multiple languages, so I encourage people to speak multiple languages, is make your passphrase a mixture of 2 or 3 different languages. I speak English, I speak Japanese, I speak some German. So actually my passwords, maybe I'm giving away too much here, but maybe my passwords are a mix with a word that's in English, a word that's in Japanese, and a word that's in German. So if anyone did try to do a word attack on my password, they might get part, but they wouldn't get the actual password. They would not get the full string. So I think if you can bring on some of these other characteristics that, any other skill that you have that might make your passwords more robust and difficult to crack, that's a good thing.
Yeah,
So I wanted to go back to the COVID-19, just some of the other crimes that have been happening. And obviously it was counterfeiting and fraud, thousands of fake N95 masks were out there. And then also in the United States, I was reading about individuals who were arrested for impersonating doctors and demanding payments for treatment. In other words, they just made up a credential. And so could the blockchain help with credentials? Verifying people's.
Do you want to take that, Steve?
No, I mean, you're right. Go ahead. I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, go right ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of identity, right? I mean, blockchain certainly is held up as a technology that can provide a very strong tool for keeping track of someone's identity. And there are certainly some innovations around blockchain to either take a person's biometric, perhaps even DNA, whatever is very unique about a person, and encrypt that information into the blockchain. So if the blockchain has some very unique information about you, then you can authenticate against that information. Then the blockchain has a record of you as a person, and that is a unique token for which you can transact that and to certainly prove who you are. So people are looking at this for identification purposes, maybe to put your passport or your birth certificate, some unique identification that says, yes, this is you. And this, of course, applies to a number of fields, such as voting, to make sure the right person is able to vote, all of these unique identifiers. I think when it comes to fraud and any kind of piracy, we certainly are looking for blockchain to be able to utilize this feature and functionality of identification to say, yes, this person is really the doctor. This is not an impersonator, and that person would have to validate either through some form of biometric input in order to say, yes, this is actually me, and I am actually credentialed to be a doctor.
That's great points.
Okay, so how concerned should we be about all these crimes that are?
Extremely. That's the easiest way to put it. It's always got to be vigilant.
Well, yeah. I mean, with the Windows thing, you were explaining to me earlier, I didn't know Windows had all this information. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, Microsoft is this kind of grabbing too much, and they're creating these mechanisms for them to get a lot of information. They're tracking every keystroke that you're typing in your computer. They know everything you're doing before it gets to Google. So it's
not a malicious keylogger, but it's just
keylogger,
grabbing.
According to Microsoft, but in the act of them doing that data can be extrapolated and used for other purposes besides them.
And that's what data brokers do, right?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of ways. There's a lot of data there too, but it's just like, do you really want that going on? At all. I mean, it's just kind of, there's a creepy factor to it other than just the fact of them, knowing what's going on. The more you have those doors locked, the better. There's just all these open windows and doors in your house that people can get in that are these different vectors of making your life difficult over time.
So Windows has more information than Google does on your computer.
They're tracking everything on the computer, not just what's going into Google.
And when you go to a website, how many trackers are tracking you when you go to these websites?
Oh, I mean, there could be a lot of, depends which websites you went to prior. So they're
yeah, I mean,
okay.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the activities people have on websites are tracked with cookies. Mm-hmm. And for folks who aren't familiar with cookies, basically these are ways in which the server can keep track of a person's activity on the client machine itself, on the browser itself. And the really good reason for using cookies is cookies really understand the state that you are in. The internet itself generally doesn't know its own state. It doesn't know where you are. All it knows is the page you're on and what you're looking at. That wouldn't work very well if you wanted to use a site like Amazon, where you're actually shopping for something. If you're using any type of e-commerce site, you want the application to know what you're doing as you're shopping, going from site to site, page to page, and putting something into a cart. You want the system to have some memory of what you're doing. Otherwise, you would have a system that with a very short-term memory would be very frustrating for you as a shopper. So that's where cookies really play a useful role, in that they're able to kind of follow you along through your journey within some type of web application to know where you are, where you are in the process of your ordering. Of course, the malicious part of it all is when cookies get hacked, first of all, and that is where malicious attackers are looking to steal cookies so that they can, one, get some of the critical information that the site has picked up about you, what you've been looking at. Also, there's tends to be, for e-commerce, lots of very personal information that gets associated into cookies, such as your credit card number, your name, maybe your billing address, and all of that can be exposed if your cookie is stolen. Some people also worried that the companies themselves that are employing these cookies are just getting a little bit too much information. And some of these cookies are very hard to remove off of your system, and they're fairly quiet. They can persist on your machine, even when you ask that cookie to be removed, and they regenerate and they're continuing to monitor. So cookies have been a bit of a cybersecurity challenge, because the actual purpose of the cookies has been really abused. And now we're trying to contain what it's looking at. So you may have seen yourself, more companies are now asking permission, whether or not you want cookies to run on your machine. So to the extent possible, you probably should say no, unless, again, you're trying to do a shopping experience where you really do need a cookie to help you through your shopping experience.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain GDRP and the cookie? You have to accept cookies, I think, to be on some of those sites, right?
Some sites do have to accept them, yes. It's definitely a fact. And then Facebook actually hijacks those cookies. You go on other sites, and that's how they serve those targeted ads. If you see them live, or even Amazon, when you go to any website, a couple clicks later, something related to that website is an ad for you. And that's because they're tracking your cookies from those other sites and then rolling them up in targeted advertising.
Well, sometimes when you're just walking and talking and your phone's kind of listening, and then sometimes you might see, is that because I didn't turn off my location on my phone, or what? How did that really happen? Can you guys explain that? It's not just a Google search, or?
It could be a couple things, a couple apps. That's why now in the new version of iOS, they show you the indication of your active listening devices. There could be an app or something listening to what you're doing, digesting that and then interpreting it through an AI and spitting out something that's going to, give you an ad or something, to kind of get your attention. It's creepy, for sure. It's like your phone's like your best friend and your worst enemy at the same time.
It is the biggest spy in your life beside the home devices, right?
Yeah.
The Google Home and Alexa and all that. Can you guys talk a little bit about that? Because when you have that on,
They're always on.
Yeah, actually, I certainly do some work in this area, in the consulting, and there are more and more companies that are leaning into this type of technology. They're active listening devices to detect your commands, like an Alexa. And so, of course, the whole drive here is to turn your home, into a computer. They want your home to be smart. The whole idea of a smart home is now very tangible. And if that can tie into your home security system, your home entertainment system, and everything else, then that's the driver. The problem is that these systems like Alexa, in order for them to hear you, they do need to listen all of the time. And that, of course, raises a huge privacy concern about what is it listening to when you're not actually giving it a command. You're just talking, perhaps to your family and friends. There was a case where there was an individual, I believe he was in Europe, and he apparently wanted some of the information from, I believe it was Google, for what was being recorded on his listening device. and they sent him a recording. It was actually of a different family, a different household altogether. So he was extremely shocked that, number one, they were listening all the time, and he was able to hear very personal conversations of this other family that wasn't his. And I think that clearly shows that the technology certainly is there. It's doing some interesting things for helping us drive, our control over our environment, but it's extremely dangerous because there is no control over what it's not supposed to be listening to. And we need to be extremely careful as to whether or not we'll employ this type of technology in our own homes, because after all, this device does have to listen in order to hear your command.
So I think it's called wake words. So you have to say a word that awakes, but you're saying it's still listening.
It has to, right? Because even for it to understand the wake word, it still needs to be listening for that term. Now, the question of whether or not they record it, how long they hold it on file, those are questions of retention. But the actual listening mechanism itself must be processing your vocals.
I don't think Alexa deletes your stuff. That was one of the things when I started using it. I boxed it back up and said, I'm not going to work with something like this because there's no way to delete. So everything's recorded all the time, no way to delete. So that's kind of terrifying in my eyes from my standpoint. So it is kind of a gray area right now where there's nothing really governing these things, and it's kind of a wild west where you have to kind of be a little careful in your own self and what's being listened and what you say to these listening devices.
Right.
Yeah, there was a case where a little girl ordered a dollhouse and cookies because she told Alexa that she wanted it, and then it arrived.
Oh, wow.
Next day. So yeah, your son could order something if the device was on and it was, listening.
That's crazy. Wow. So, okay.
So Professor, what else have you been, working on and at Villanova and some blockchain world?
Sure. Yeah, I'm really happy to announce that Villanova will be launching a space satellite that will have the first private blockchain that will be used in space. We'll be launching this likely around the end of December. We're flying this on the Firefly Aerospace rocket. The launch vehicle is in place. They're going through their final testing. But we'll have to wait until their actual confirmed launch, as this is the first flight and the maiden flight of this particular launch vehicle. Nonetheless, we're extremely excited that we are going to test what a private blockchain can do if we're able to have satellites talk to one another. And basically the idea is that since we have so many satellites in space already, and the ease of sending more satellites is just increasing year after year, the trajectory of the number of small satellites being released into space is quite incredible, with companies like SpaceX and with Blue Origin, that we can imagine that over the next 5 to 10 years, there'll be potentially hundreds of thousands of satellites that'll be orbiting the Earth. That's a bit of a problem because there's a sustainability concern. How many more of these satellites can be placed around Earth without creating some huge risk of collision, particularly as they get old and maybe they start falling out of their orbits. They may fall into another satellite's orbit and there's a collision. And if there is a collision, that's a very huge problem because the debris resulting from that collision results in many small particles that are flying faster than a bullet and can hit functioning satellites. They also could potentially hit the International Space Station with astronauts on board. So we need to think carefully, how do we leverage the satellites we already have in space and allow them to communicate with one another to maybe leverage data that they already have and transact that data with another satellite that may need the information to complete its mission. So this transaction process is something that we're looking at to help secure the transaction and make sure that the data actually was received by the receiving satellite, and also a mechanism for the receiving satellite to pay for that information. And if you think about it, that is a new way of really monetizing space as we know it and introducing a new form of space economy. But we think blockchain has a really strong place in space by helping satellites to transact with other satellites. So really excited about that.
Yeah, that's cool.
This is it doesn't use the internet. I don't understand like why, because what if the internet went down? The satellite isn't gonna help.
Yeah, so the internet is not using the internet at all. It's actually two satellites talking to one another, but they're if your satellites are actually nodes of the blockchain, and a node is just one of the servers of many nodes on the blockchain. If those satellites are able to signal to one another and process on a blockchain, they can all replicate the same information. So the transaction will all be replicated across all of those satellites that are part of the blockchain in space. And so any transaction that's put across the blockchain will be confirmed by those nodes in space on those satellites. So that's the process that we're looking to really exercise and to measure. Can we have a stable blockchain? You have to remember that these satellites are flying at very fast speeds, 17,000 miles an hour. And so they don't always see each other. They see each other for small durations of time, and then they're out of view of another satellite that may be part of the blockchain. How do we make sure that those satellites are able to see each other enough for all of the data to be replicated across the entire blockchain so that we have that common source of truth? That is indeed the test that we are looking to perform. The first leg of the test, it'll be multi-phased, but the first phase of our test is really to make sure that if we have a private blockchain in space, it can signal down to Earth, and we can have very secure transactions between a space satellite and an Earth ground station if we have the rest of the blockchain on Earth. The next phase of the experiment is then to put multiple satellites in space, at least 3, where we can then see how they talk to one another as they are orbiting the Earth at very fast speeds. And they wouldn't travel necessarily together, but they could be on very different orbits. And as they see each other maybe once every 90 minutes, then they would sync up with one another and share whatever data they have so that they are in full synchronization.
These would be U.S. satellites or global, I don't know.
Well, that's an interesting question, yeah, because the whole point of this type of blockchain is that we want satellites to be able to talk to each other, transact with one another, even if they're owned by different companies or even different countries. So if, for example, Japan has a satellite in space with some very unique data, maybe that satellite is monitoring certain weather conditions, and you have a US satellite that is also doing some type of weather calculations, but could very much use the data that's on the Japanese satellite. It could help with the US satellite completing its mission, filling out its data, understanding the situation a little better. It should be able to transact some of that information from the Japanese satellite over to the US satellite, so that US satellite can kind of corroborate that information with other data it's collecting and send information back down to Earth at the right time with more fuller information and more complete package. So that's the idea. You should be able to allow satellites from different companies or different countries to interact and transact. And because the blockchain is this immutable record, it serves as a very secure way to make sure that those transactions happen and that they were appropriately paid for.
Oh, that's great.
It's coded in English in the blockchain, or how?
It's in the language of validity, probably.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the communication, the signals would, they communicate on certain frequencies. The token, we would need to introduce a token native to that blockchain. And because it's private, it would be a blockchain just made of a very specific number of satellites, for which you would have to get permission to be a member, right? So in a private blockchain, you have to be admitted into the consortium, if you will, to be part of the blockchain. Unlike a public blockchain, like the Bitcoin blockchain or Ethereum, they're open, anyone can join and anyone can leave. Private blockchains are more secure in the sense that you need to be given permission to join. And companies are more interested in the private blockchain because of that security feature. They would never tolerate transferring anything that might be proprietary on a public blockchain. So we feel, the security aspects of having these types of space blockchains is we want to make sure that if companies are going to leverage satellites to transact information for commercial reasons, it really has to be secure, and it has to give companies the comfort that any type of proprietary information that could be transacted between satellites is just within a group of institutions that have been approved to be a part of that blockchain. On the other hand, we also have to make sure that those satellites cannot be hacked. Of course, anything can be hackable, but we need to have a very high threshold for protecting these satellites to make sure if one of the satellites is, say, attacked in some type of cybersecurity attack, that all the other satellites can still maintain what the truth is, that the information on those satellites are not affected. So these are a number of questions that we're looking at. How do we secure the blockchain? How many nodes do we need in order to make for a very robust blockchain? All of that's a part of this experiment that we're looking forward to conducting over the next month or two.
Have you thought about hacking satellites, Steve? You're an ethical hacker. I mean,
Yeah, actually, it's already been done. There's actually a Raspberry Pi floating on one of our satellites up there that a hacker put on with the satellite physically, and it launched and it's there. It's not going nowhere. So yeah, that's a thing. I don't know if you guys heard of that, but there's yeah, the Raspberry Pi is a little kind of microprocessor computer. It started off being like a $25 computer. You can do a lot of cool stuff for DIY hackers, and you can do awesome little things with it. It's low power. It's the size of a credit card, and they were able to slip it onto the satellite. And I could see that being more popular in the future as these devices get smaller. So that's already happened, unfortunately.
how did that? Wow.
I know, sorry.
They had access to the satellite.
Somebody had access to it. So yeah, they had to have physical access to somehow somebody.
So they social engineered somebody to get even to that. And that all comes with credentials that they use to personalize.
Somebody figured it out, but there's nothing you can do other than go up there and fly a rocket up to it and take it off. It's there physically. Yeah, so that's become at least a thing recently. So I don't know. Nothing seems to be sacred, and when people think they even in space, they still can be compromised. So at least having something on a blockchain allows, even if that node was compromised, when it communicated to the blockchain, to those other nodes, it's going to have to give the truth or it won't be able to communicate. So even if it was hacked, the mechanism of the blockchain does provide a more secure mechanism to keep it secured in the data into it. They might see what's going on. They won't be able to modify it though.
Yeah, that's right. That's the beauty of the blockchain is it really secures those transactions because all of those servers representing nodes are holding that same information, and they are processing blocks of transactions, which get confirmed over some period of time, whether it's 10 minutes, as in the case of Bitcoin blockchain, or 15 seconds in the case of Ethereum. There's some period of time in which a new block is introduced to the edge of the blockchain. The particular consensus model that we'll be using to verify these new blocks is what's called proof of authority. And for those who have some Bitcoin, maybe you have some Bitcoin in your wallet and you're fairly wealthy, Bitcoin blockchain uses what's called proof of work. And proof of work basically uses a lot of computational energy in order to prove that you have invested enough effort into confirming a new block. So that's basically, it becomes computationally expensive for anyone to try to undermine the blockchain simply because the Bitcoin blockchain requires the expense of so much energy in order to verify a new block. And so you may have heard of the Bitcoin using so much energy, the servers humming along, they're very hot, entire country, some of their economy is actually being shifted because the blockchain, the Bitcoin blockchain is using so much energy that it's starting to adjust the price of energy itself for certain towns. So this is a very real problem. It's not sustainable. People have complained that it's not even environmentally friendly to have the Bitcoin blockchain use so much energy. Of course, that would never work on a satellite. You would drain the energy of a satellite very quickly. The battery would be depleted. So we can't use proof of work. We need to use some other mechanism that uses very, very little energy, but is just as secure in terms of verifying a new transaction. So there has to be something that we are putting up as that's valuable, which helps us to verify these new blocks. And in proof of authority, what you're putting up is your reputation. So each person who controls a node on the blockchain is basically putting up their reputation and saying, yes, my node is secure. I invest to make sure it remains secure against cyber attacks. And by having a secure server, we're upholding the integrity of the blockchain itself. That's the idea. So with proof of authority, we need to have enough of these individuals, enough validator nodes who basically are special, the special participants of the blockchain to say, yes, we are very invested in the security of the blockchain, the integrity of the blockchain, and therefore we put up our own reputation. If we do not secure our own servers properly, we'll be booted out. We'll be booted out of the blockchain, probably never to be allowed back again. And of course, then people know who you are. They may know that organization, and so it's certainly a mar on that person's credibility and reputation for doing anything like that in the future. So this is a mechanism that uses very little energy, but it still has some risk, basically some stake for which upholds the integrity of that blockchain.
Okay, well, with proof of stake, you had to hold the tokens, but with this, it's just your reputation, your authority, your stake.
That's right, yeah. Proof of stake, and for those who aren't aware of the difference between proof of stake and proof of authority, proof of stake is, in order for you to show that you're pretty serious about upholding the integrity of the blockchain, you have to actually put money in. It's kind of like putting money in at a casino table. And lost a little bit of light here. But effectively what it means is, depending on how much money you are putting in, it gives you more of a chance of controlling the validation of new blocks on the blockchain. There's one big problem with that model, however, is that different people may have very different levels of wealth. You can have a very, very wealthy individual who, relative to their wealth, they put up a very small amount. That small amount could be quite a bit to other people who do not have nearly as much wealth as that one individual. So the person who is wealthy may have no more honesty or integrity for the blockchain than a malicious hacker. In fact, that person could be a malicious hacker. They simply just have a lot of money. So it's not a very fair way to measure a person's willingness to uphold the integrity of the blockchain. Using proof of authority is a more fair way. And of course, there may be some people who have nothing to lose, but it's certainly a more fair way because your reputation is what it is. And if it's marred, it's very hard for us to gain the trust back again.
That's interesting. I have a question because I haven't had too much experience with proof of authority. Now, how do you become an authority? And there's any way of being diminished from an authority? Like, there's any governance for that?
Yeah, I mean, the process of becoming a validator is, because it is a private blockchain, and proof of authority is primarily used for these private blockchain models.
Sure.
You would first need to be admitted to the blockchain, and then if you wish to be a validator, you would basically go up to the council of all the other, blockchain validators or blockchain participants, to say, yes, I want to be a validator, and I'm going to have to demonstrate to you that I'm very serious about making sure my server is very secure. And of course, the rules for what that means, or the threshold that you have to pass to show that your server is very secure, may vary from blockchain to blockchain. But there's some threshold there that a person would have to demonstrate that they are keeping their server secure, that they themselves are not malicious, they have a good background, good credibility. And then they become considered a validator node. If they breach breach the trust of the group, then they simply can be revoked from being a validator.
I see. Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah.
And we're taking questions from the audience. If you want to type in the chat, I can ask our
haven't looked over there.
presenters.
Oh yeah, I want to I'll post in some stuff here too for some of the resources.
And Professor, do you have a link to your project or some information where we could?
I sent his link to his website. I just posted in the chat a bunch of the links from earlier. Also some really useful ones, and me and him as our LinkedIn and our websites to our companies.
Great. Yeah, thanks a lot, Steve. And we certainly have some additional information if after the program you want to mail it out to those who attended.
Okay.
There's a number of them we have online, but I think Steve has probably the best ones.
Okay, awesome. Just making sure we have them there. They're listed. I don't see too many questions here in the chat window, so I don't know if we have any questions here at the moment. If anybody does, by all means, please put them in there. We'd love to chat about this, and if you have any good questions, we'd love to hear them.
Well, we have some people in the audience that have been working on identity and credentials. Would you like to go on camera, Mary, and just talk about credentials just a little bit, since you are in the blockchain space?
Sure. Thanks. Hi, Rhonda.
Hi, Mary.
It's fascinating, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to listen in. It's just some of it's a little bit above my skill set, but it's very interesting. And so I work with Highland Credentials, which is a organization that started as Learning Machine back in 2017 at MIT, and we issue credentials that are anchored to the blockchain using a hashing algorithm, and then allow individuals to present verified credentials for academic degrees or professional licenses or whatever. But I think it's really interesting, Professor, what you were saying with regard to identity, because while we can confirm the cryptographic key associated with the issuer and the cryptographic key associated with the recipient, there really still isn't the identity component, which is something I think we're all still. So I think,
Right.
If this was the case where we had to present a credential to law enforcement, you would still want to see some kind of government issued ID associated with that to say, yes, I'm a doctor, I could go into this secure COVID testing site. But I think that's sort of the next generation of what we're trying to accomplish in terms of integrating that identity with your digital assets that represent your accomplishments over time.
That's it.
Bobby,
Yeah, wonderful.
Go ahead.
you're online too, and I know you've presented on identity at the GA. You want to come on screen?
Not really on screen, but I'll talk.
Okay.
I'm walking and I have my laptop with me. I think it's a great project. The underlying technology for the blockchain is that a Ledger project.
I'm sorry.
Did you hear
lost
me?
it. No, I'm sorry, Bobby. Can you say that again?
Okay. I was just asking, what was the underlying private blockchain technology? Is it Hyperledger?
Yeah, it's Ethereum private, a private version of the Ethereum.
Are you using the Go Quorum or the Besu attachments for the privacy piece?
Now we're using the Ethereum private version. Yeah, the Go version. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the Go Quorum. Okay, great. Yeah, it's
Right.
a great product. I know Grace from that project, and it's really reliable. So I'd love to hear more if you have a newsletter or information on it.
Sure. Yes, we can share some.
I would be interested a little bit in a discussion, and again, not that I would add a whole lot to it, but when we talk about data security and public blockchains versus private blockchains, and my position is that a lot of it is about how you wish to access that information or who you wish to access that information. So if you have any thoughts about that, I'd be very curious, just to a little bit of a download, if you don't mind.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the public private blockchain, when it came out, it had quite a bit of energy and excitement around certainly first cryptocurrencies. So everyone's looking at it in that regard. But then people started around 2013 and 2014, and in fact, MIT was getting involved in the MIT project to understand the adoption of blockchain. People really started to look at blockchain as different than just cryptocurrency, that it could do so much more. And so folks started looking at other applications of blockchain, security information, supply chain management, asset management, as you mentioned. So all of these other applications really started bringing forward the possibility that businesses could start using blockchain. But when we started looking at businesses and their disposition around public blockchains, it was very clear they weren't very comfortable with putting any type of proprietary information, whether it's proprietary or not. The mere fact that it was a private business trying to transact on the blockchain, they wanted to make sure it was completely private, and even have additional controls within the blockchain itself, that even the nodes of the blockchain would have some ways in which it can separate who can see what on the blockchain. So some products like Corda blockchain have come along to really try to address the issue of private companies using the blockchain. Some of the major consortiums and industries adopting Corda, for example, is in fintech, just the banks on Wall Street. They are the ones that really help to grow Corda and look at some of the security measures that would satisfy a financial services industry. And obviously that's fairly strict. And they really needed to make sure that not each bank could see all the other transactions on the blockchain of other banks, but that they still had a common shared network shared among the banking institutions. So I think the real watershed is this enterprise, the enterprise versus the kind of the public use, and what does it mean to join a public blockchain if you're just anyone, you can join it, versus being in a consortium that's under much more control. The moment, however, we start going into private blockchains, it raises this question, is the blockchain, is it really a blockchain anymore? I mean, we are now getting back into governance models or groups that we have to trust. And yes, there's some degree of sacrifice of the pure blockchain in the original sense of the word, of the public blockchain. Yes, we now have a consortium, but it is a community that cares about that particular blockchain. So we can say, at least for the members of that blockchain, that represents a blockchain that they can transact upon, and they all can share in the trust model that blockchain permits. One example of kind of companies using the blockchain that I was very intrigued of was actually Comcast, which is doing a lot of the content providing. So they have Peacock, they have Hulu and Netflix, and all of these streaming service providers. And one of the big revenue models they have, of course, is advertising. So they want to monetize through advertising. So actually, they do have a ad tech division, and that ad tech division uses a blockchain in order to have all of the content providers share the content that actually draws the eyes of consumers. And by sharing this information, they all benefit because they know what content to provide to maximize their own revenue through advertising. Yet they're competitors, right? Each one of these content providers are competitors. Netflix is a competitor to Hulu, is a competitor to Amazon Prime, and so on. So what's blockchain really useful for is achieving this Nash equilibrium, right? The ability to have competitors actually benefit by cooperating, even though they're competitors. And so blockchain is very useful for that because it can keep some of the information anonymous between the parties, but allow them to cooperate at the same time while they're competitors.
Thank you. It's really, really very interesting. And I think when I think about just the work that we're trying to do in terms of public sector credentialing and licensing. So I think, by default, we issue to public blockchains because the idea is that I'm a real estate agent, I'm going to come in your home, and anyone needs to be able to access and verify that credential without permissions or passwords. So I think the use cases vary, and I think it's very interesting to think about sector-focused blockchains and then how we might draw the public into just using blockchain technology as a way to improve regulatory compliance or public safety in general.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
I agree.
Well, I was studying this report on what your information is actually worth on the dark web. And Mary, they were talking about your college degree, could be worth anywhere from $100 to $400 on the dark.
Not mine.
So your company is trying to secure that information?
Well, I think the intent was to eliminate the barriers to accessing your credentials. So, when we look at the beaches of Greece and refugees landing on the beaches and drying out their engineering degrees on the beach, this is a problem we can solve, right? That we have the most highly educated refugee population in human history with absolutely no way to prove their credentials. So, if they were able, even individuals who were fleeing hurricanes last year and trying to come to the United States, and they had, oh, you have to have documentation of your status, your birth certificates, all of that. Everyone had a phone on that boat. Everybody had a mobile phone, and they would have theoretically had access to a digitally verifiable credential if it had been issued by their government. So I think we're just trying to make that transition where we're really providing an era of mobility and equity and access through verification of credentials that's improving like a global ecosystem, a global economy of trust.
Yeah, like all the firefighters and the doctors that are flying all around. How are you really sure that they really are the doctor or the firefighter?
Right.
Or
I have a question.
I think the identity piece is key, because we're not there yet. So we can confirm, yes, you have a credential issued by the state of Pennsylvania to Mary Strain. I can't confirm I'm Mary Strain just yet. Well, we can. We haven't. Highland hasn't solved that problem.
I have a question for you, Mary. So I'm also, I don't know if you know what NFTs or non-fungible tokens are. I'm wondering if maybe a further step, what you could do with that is have a picture or a gift of that certificate along with the data. And that would really be a useful thing because then you actually have the picture of the certificate more than just the data. And that's a really easy thing to do these days.
Well, if I'm understanding correctly, we actually have a human presentation readable layer of the document. So it looks like a degree when you open it up.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
You're backing it by blockchain.
Yeah, so the credential itself is hashed to the blockchain at the issuance by the issuing institution with that cryptographic hash. So it's not the actual document sitting on the blockchain, it's a receipt layer. But when you open it up to verify it, it has a human readable presentation layer. And that's intentional because people still want the functionality of a diploma.
Well, yeah, I get you. But an NFT can be an image or a GIF or a JPEG, and that can be saved right in the blockchain along with the data. And then nothing has to be saved out externally.
Right, but that presented some PII concerns if you were to put all of that information on.
Sure, I can understand that too. Sure. Okay, just curious. Thank you.
But I think this is one of the really interesting areas of blockchain. Blockchain was created to deal with basically one of the last legs of the conversion from the analog world to the digital world, right? We've kind of moved so many things from the analog world to digital world. One of the things we couldn't do so easily is moving cash, like the physical cash, to the digital world. And the blockchain was really the technology that could do that. It moved things that we handle as cash in the physical world into a digital domain. But now we want this digital domain and the use of these tokens that we can apply to the things other than money. We want it to be able to kind of connect with the physical world again. So we do want to get back to having these tokens now somehow confirmed with and touch the physical world. And we want to do this for a variety of things. One, we want human identification to happen. We also want to track physical things, like whether they're machine parts, aviation parts, fruit that may come from a farm, or an animal. So we want to track these things through a supply chain management life cycle. But in order to do that, basically what you were asking for is for the blockchain to somehow interface with the real world. And this is the big challenge. This is the whole identity challenge. How do we put something on that physical thing that will allow the blockchain to actually validate that, yes, this is the one unique thing that's represented by this unique token? And so when it comes to humans, Of course, yes, we do have some very unique things about us, and DNA is probably one of the most unique things. But there's also biometrics and other sorts like that. But then we get into this problem that Mary raised, which is the PII, right? All the personal information that you may have to now commit in order to show that you're the unique person that's now tied to this unique token. So it's an interesting problem because we could solve it if we simply would give up all this personal information, but then that is a huge risk to our own personal identity. We're sharing perhaps a little too much. And this is what we are going to have to figure out going forward with the evolution of blockchain. If we can figure out how we can get blockchain to talk to the physical world, to represent the physical world, then we can certainly find huge applications of blockchains in areas that we would want, including voting, right? Voting is one big area, but in order to do any kind of voting, you have to get over this issue of the identity, right? You have to somehow solve that problem to make sure that the right person is voting, that they have the authority to vote. And certainly people are using voting already, using blockchain and voting. It's not wide scale, but it's already happening. And it's being done gradually and in small scales. So we'll see over time if we can address this issue of private information and personal information so that people can be represented, their security can be represented on the blockchain.
But you don't even have to show your ID to vote. Your name just has to appear on that list.
Right, and the system would have to somehow, it would need something from you to, whether it's a face recognition or look at your face and say, yes, here's your unique, kind of facial dots in that profile of your face. And then it says, I have that information in the blockchain token and it matches. Or if you put a thumbprint on, your thumbprint's unique and it matches what is recorded in the token of the blockchain. So whatever it's measuring, it has to be unique. But now we get into that question of, private information about you. Are we getting some very private information that could be abused?
That's my cat.
Awesome.
Hi, I have a question. My internet connection is coming out. Actually, not a question. I just want to supply something. Amelia Gardner, she won the Government Blockchain Award for innovation. She is the Utah County Clerk, and she's doing elections this year on a blockchain. And I think she's going to be speaking at one of the open meetings that Hyperledger hosts. So I will pass that information on to the group when it should be in late November or early December when she's speaking for us. So I will definitely pass that on so you can see what the elections look like in practice.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah.
That sounds awesome.
Well, can we speak about, putting birth records on the blockchain? Is Delaware still doing that, Bobby, or anybody?
I don't think in this country they're doing that. And if they are, it is, again, like a specific case by case. I know the Netherlands has a huge project where they opened up, the government's working with academia and enterprise and opened up their records for them to just go in. And I know that they're trying to do digital identities for birth records alongside with your regular paper credentials. But I think have gotten pretty far with that. The VON network is great for a use case for digital credentials, but that's more for businesses up in Canada to track other businesses. But that's been in operation for a while, and it's a really good use case to read about if you're interested in that.
Okay.
There's actually been a county in Utah that's also issuing marriage licenses on the blockchain.
Yeah, that's her. That's Amelia.
That's her.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
But they are putting the entire certificate on the chain. So it hashes a PDF.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think some of these interesting innovation areas are coming out of West Virginia and Utah. They have been some of the front runners in terms of using blockchain for voting. The voting was done for military personnel and their families overseas, just to allow the military and family of military to be able to vote during election cycles. And they did the first of this during the midterm elections for the House and Senate. What is a little controversial, and it's still the jury's still out on this, is how secure some of these voting practices on the blockchain, because they are running over the internet. You know, the expectation that people are using their cell phones to input the vote. And there are a group of individuals who say, yes, this can be done. It can be done securely. And then there are a number of cybersecurity experts who say that the internet is just inherently it's not secure and is vulnerable to all sorts of attacks, whether they're DDoS attacks or ransomware attacks, or some type of malware that can get into the system. So I think we're starting small, and I think as we look at small applications, perhaps at state level or county level, we'll see how these work out. I think the solution ultimately is basically using blockchain in a number of elections over time. And perhaps they get larger and larger in populations. But the blockchain needs a track record in this area. It needs to prove itself that it can actually do votes securely and can withstand the attacks of malicious actors. So, and this is an area where ethical hacking teams certainly can play a very, very good value, in that they can really challenge a blockchain-based voting system to see if there are vulnerabilities that can be easily exploited. But I think over time, we'll have to gain some confidence before blockchain could be used in, say, a national election. We really have to have the trust that the blockchain itself, basically writing on the internet, cannot be exploited in some way.
Okay. I wanted to get your opinion about the fact now that, PayPal and Square are accepting Bitcoin, and you think this will help with the adoption, or people still won't understand the difference between blockchain and Bitcoin, but what do you think it'll do for the financial?
Well, we saw a huge uptick in Bitcoin since PayPal made that announcement. So anyone holding Bitcoin has gotten a couple of $1,000s per Bitcoin richer. And that certainly is a nice boost for people's confidence in Bitcoin. It has been flat for a while. I think it's a big step overall in the acceptance of Bitcoin itself, and this goes back to one of the investigations that MIT did in 2014, kind of measuring the adoption of Bitcoin. And for those who aren't familiar with the experiment, basically what MIT did in 2014 is they gave all of the undergraduates at MIT $100 worth of Bitcoin. Now on MIT campus, at any given time, there's about 4,000 undergraduate students. They gave $100 of Bitcoin to each of them, and Bitcoin is also accepted at all of the MIT kind of vending stations. All of the shops there accept it for buying pizza or buying clothing, what have you. So what they found was that about 90% of the students immediately cashed out. They just wanted, hard cash, right? Give me the US dollar. I want to get back to fiat. So people weren't very confident in Bitcoin for spending it for anything. So they wanted actual US dollar. You had about, roughly 5% or a little bit more who held on to the Bitcoin, right? They actually hoarded it with the hopes that Bitcoin would go up. And sure enough, it did, and it's still going up. So maybe these individuals are feeling very good because they're so much wealthier. There was a very, very small percentage of individuals who actually did buy something with their Bitcoin. They actually bought pizza or they bought some clothing. And that taught MIT researchers, as well as the world, something very interesting about Bitcoin, that it wasn't doing what people thought it was supposed to do, right? That is to replace fiat currencies. It certainly wasn't doing what Satoshi Nakamoto or whoever represents Satoshi Nakamoto was expecting it to do. It was doing something very different. And that really raised the question of adoption of Bitcoin. What were we actually working with? What was blockchain that really supports Bitcoin? And how were people really adopting this new technology? So when we see companies like PayPal accept Bitcoin, that's a huge, credibility, boost, basically a vouch for confidence in Bitcoin itself. And it's a major payment platform that's actually taken as a payment method.
Right.
So this makes it one step closer to, being adopted in ways that we, expected it, that we would actually exchange money with each other and we would buy things with it. And so I think it really raises some credibility with Bitcoin.
But at MIT, there was no education as to what Bitcoin was. They just gave it to them?
Well, MIT, being MIT, like pretty much everyone understood what Bitcoin was. There's a number of clubs on the campus.
They understood the technology.
They understood the technology. They understood certainly what Bitcoin was trying to do. And there's a lot of research at the media labs around similar types of technology. It's even theorized that Satoshi Nakamoto was a person from MIT, right? So it's a rumor, it's unconfirmed, but that it's out there. But yes, there are a number of clubs, and when I went to MIT as well, it was feverish pitch of understanding what the Bitcoin is, what the blockchain is, and how different applications can be used on Bitcoin or on blockchain rather.
Well, now I believe we've given our congressman Bitcoin, $50 worth of Bitcoin. I think it was the Digital Chamber of Commerce, I believe. Bobby, do you know? But yeah, every congressman.
Yeah, every congressman received $50 in Bitcoin. I was thinking when we were talking though of the situation, was it Venezuela who decided to try a CBCD first and gave it to everyone, and they cashed in instead of using it to stabilize their economy? Because they just weren't ready for it. It just they cashed out, like you said, like the students at MIT, they cashed out right away, and the project busted. Interesting though. So
Interesting.
Amazing.
So I don't know if this will help our, government learn about it. I mean, there wasn't really that much education, but it was, they were given $50 worth of Bitcoin.
I think this is Mary again. I think one of the real pieces here is to develop applications that extract individuals from the blockchain layer of all of this. I say all the time as a salesperson, the first rule of blockchain is don't talk about blockchain.
Right?
It's the it's the plumbing, and the application layer is really where the public and individuals and congressmen and individuals are going to interact with this and benefit from the technology. And I think one of the challenges that just our entire industry and ecosystem faces is going in and talking about blockchain, and you sort of turn people off immediately. They don't understand it, or they associate it with nefarious activities. I think we have to have a lot more discipline about talking about real life use cases and applications that make sense and present beautiful, good, solid user experience application layer work. So that's just an idea.
Sure.
And I think in Wyoming, they just passed the first dual bank that can deal in Bitcoin and cash, that Caitlin Long advocated for it. And I think she was successful in it. So things are moving again in bits and pieces in areas you don't expect.
That's awesome to hear.
Yeah, I would completely agree with Mary. I mean, I think there's always this curiosity around what blockchain is, how it works. But at the end of the day, I mean, people just want to get things done. And if we draw a parallel between the internet and the evolution of the internet and the evolution of blockchain, when we use the internet, we don't really care, how our information is traversing, the network in order for our email to show up. All we care about is that our email is received and we can send our email. And the same is with the blockchain, right? No one really is too concerned or wants to be too concerned with the plumbing of what's happening on the blockchain. It's kind of like talking at ends about a database, and I don't really care. I just want my data there and stored. So I think one of the things that we're really focusing on at the university is really trying to apply blockchain to a number of use cases that we feel have some merit, and to really take them to fullest extent possible. And my company does play a role in that as well, and in cooperating with the university. So we have the research portion from the university and the commercial portion from the company to really try to productize some of these use cases and to see if they really stand the test of time. And when it gets to the commercialization part, yes, we have to pay a lot of attention to the user interface, the user experience, and ensuring that the user may understand that it's on the blockchain, and they want, of course, know what does that mean for them. Well, it hopefully means that your information is more secure, or there's more transparency, so that certainly becomes one of the selling points, or the features of the application. But at the end of the day, they're concerned with performance, they're concerned with accuracy, and they're concerned that whatever application the blockchain supporting is giving them some benefit in their life.
Well, JP Morgan is trying to help with that in the financial, with the JP Morgan coin. You saw that just happened recently. So I think it's $6 trillion in transactions they send over the SWIFT system.
Yeah. JP Morgan does have their own, it's basically an Ethereum version of the blockchain. And I've been in talks with JP Morgan about their blockchain. So
I think Consensus, didn't Consensus just take that piece over?
They may
Consensus
have,
ate JP Morgan coin for breakfast.
Did that just happen this week?
I think so, yeah. But
Okay,
I'm pretty sure that the Joe Lubin people have now acquired that piece.
Okay.
That's good to know.
So that's not good, or it is good for Ripple?
Probably not good for Ripple, which is probably a good thing.
I have Ripple.
Ripple's okay.
Yeah. There's many. We have over 2,000 cryptocurrencies to choose from. So I won't cry for Ripple if they're not doing.
I think there's 7,000 now.
Yeah, that's what I heard. 7,000.
It's around 7,000. It's not. It's a lot more.
Yeah, it's huge.
It's insane. It's awesome though at the same time. So I'm glad to see all this stuff really take fruition, and it's an amazing technology. I love it. So
I think we need to close in the next couple of minutes. Did you have anything else you'd like to summarize, Steve, and then I'll at the professor?
I mean, I'm okay. I mean, I think we really dived into quite a few different topics. I think it was a pleasure being on this panel here with Rhonda and Hasshi. I think it was really enlightening to me. I had a great time. So other than that, it's a pleasure.
Yeah, I would echo the same thing. Yeah, it was a really great pleasure being on this forum and having all the contributions, from Steve, Rhonda, great questions, and Mary and Robbie, wonderful dialogue around security, but also the implications of blockchain on security and how we can improve security around some of these new innovations around blockchain technology. So look forward to seeing how things play out, and maybe we'll be back sometime again to talk about where things are in the future.
Absolutely.
Jennifer, did you want to?
Yes. I really, really hope you are coming back to talk to us and especially update us about the developments with the space shuttle project. I think that is so cool and so very fascinating. Thank you so much, Dr. Sudler, for being here. Thank you, Rhonda, for doing a great job moderating and asking very poignant questions. And Mac, thank you also for your expertise in showcasing your knowledge. So thank you so much, everybody, for being with us today. We will have new programming in 2021, and we also look forward to unrolling the very special educational community service initiative that will also be unveiled in 2021. So please reach out to me, Rhonda, Steve, any other Philly DIB member if you want to get more involved in the group, or if you want to make sure you're on our newsletter list to get apprised of when we're having future events and to be included in them. So thank you, everyone. Be well and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Pleasure.